Kia ora koutou. I'm Sean Davis, part of the team at Venture Taranaki, and you're joining us for another Ahead of the Curve webinar brought to you by Venture Taranaki in partnership with the Regional Business Partners Network. Since lockdown, Venture Taranaki has taken over 4,000 COVID inquiries and distributed over $720,000 in COVID-related enterprise support funding. The funding received is to be used towards supporting your business with professional advice such as financial, marketing strategy, legal, and human resources. We're here for your business, and you can reach us through our website at business.taranaki.info. Today we have Tim Carrington from Carrington Recruitment covering re-employment and tips how to secure your next job. This information pack is timely as latest figures show job seeker numbers are up 58.8% in New Plymouth Waitara, up 52.5% in the Stratford district, and up 45.7% in South Taranaki. If you have recently lost your job due to COVID-19, there is specific COVID-19 income relief payment that may be available to you. This support through working income can get you up to 12 weeks of support to help with living costs after a sudden job loss and give you time to find other work. I'll post the link in the information in the chat box. So speaking of chat boxes, just a bit of housekeeping rules with the webinar. If you go to the bottom panel and have a click on chat box, this is where you can interact with all audience and panelists. And then there's also a Q&A box. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please post them in there and Tim and I will get to them at the end. Over to you now, Tim.
Right, thank you. Right, I'll just share my screen. As we've talked about a bit, I'm no techno person when it comes to this. In fact, if I had it my way, I'd probably be roaming around. So don't tend to look at me too much, just look at the content and listen. I've got notes here as well. So a little bit about myself. I moved back to Taranaki at about 2010 and have been in recruitment for my whole career, really. I started at the hospital. So engineering and doctors is were my main two areas, but I've tended to just sort of focus on Taranaki in general since then. I do a few other things around the province as well, but this is, actually the strategy of helping people get a job and what they need to know is probably my number one passion. It's not always easily, to sort of turn that into a job as such, because, up until now, most people have been pretty lucky with being able to find roles. And that kind of leads me to this whole point here. And this could be done in 10 stages. It honestly could. But for me, the main thing when you're going throughout your career is that I think a lot of people forget how you or forget what you actually offer other candidates. Sorry, I'm just getting back up to the top. What you offer employers, and you often rely on your manager and someone like that to say, hey, look, you're really good at this and you've done really well at that, and then you don't have a job and you haven't owned that process. So this spiel that I'm going to go on is really just about understanding your value. And if you don't understand your value, then you're going to find it quite tricky in any job market, good or bad. But especially when there's less roles, employers are a little bit reluctant to hire people, but they especially aren't sure if you're not sure about who you are. So the big takeaway is just to really think about this. I mean, the process of finding a job is just so unique in that most of us just are so used to what's happened. But when you really cut it back, it is literally, we've practiced live. People are actually practicing this process of going through a job with a very real outcome that, someone's going to give you money and then you increase your career and those sorts of things, but you haven't practiced the process beforehand. So people that are super confident have often done well, but they couldn't really teach the other person how to do that. It just comes through that confidence. So in a market where it's really tight, it's often one of those things where you're like, well, how do I actually learn this stuff? And for me, the big takeaway is just really thinking about this process. Doing that same thing. Oh, I'll send a cover letter. I'll look on Seek, send a cover letter and look at the job description and put my application in. It might work, but what happens if it doesn't? You just can't keep on doing that same thing and expect that it'll just drop for you, because that's not how things work. You need to really treat getting a job like a job. That's the main thing. But what I'm really trying to push here is you really understanding yourself, what you're good at, what you're not so good at, what some of the industries you're in. Like, you really need to own yourself, and you really need other people to know that about you, not just you. So you need to be able to say it out loud and articulate it. And especially in this Taranaki region, you really need your family and friends to know those things about you, because it's often them having a coffee with their friends and one of those people mentioned that there might be a job going, and that's where someone might drop your name. But there's no point in dropping your name. If you can drop your name and skills, then that's really, really good. A lot of the amount of times I hear someone spending 6 months looking for a job and then getting one, and then one of their friends goes, oh, I didn't know that you were looking for a job. We've been looking for someone for the last 2 months. They're just so common. So just make sure those stones are turned, and that your network really knows that you're looking. So that's really important. But for me, yeah, as I keep saying, and this is what I will ram home, is what are your unique selling points? I know that's kind of a sales term, but what value are you bringing to an organization? It's not for them to decide, remember. I mean, they might talk to you for all of an hour and a half through the whole process after you've sent your application in. That's not really long enough for them to work you out. And so this whole process needs to be, you need to cut to the chase. What value are you bringing? Now, that doesn't have to be that you've sold 50 BMWs for the yard this year. That might be that you are super efficient with your administration, and as a result, the sales team was able to increase but that might be that nobody's actually told you that. And that's my little point here about understanding your own value rather than a manager telling you. You've got to really sit down and look at your career and own some of the things that you've contributed to. That's really essential, because when I hire someone, if I wanted to hire someone in another business that I might do, I'd love it for someone to walk in the room and just say, this is what I'm good at, this is why I could help you, and so you should hire me. Like, what have you got to lose? Instead, what normally happens is people send in these pieces of paper, they see a job they like, they put it in, and they hope for a call, and then they hope that the person works out that they would be a good match by asking certain questions, and you hope you give the right answer. You see, it works in a market where there's scarce resources, because they will put in extra time and effort to make sure that they've got the right person. But in this market where it's it's totally candidate heavy, it's going to be those people that understand their value and understand that value in relation to that employer. So I was talking to the principal at Fitzroy School the other day, and we were talking about exactly this, and how a teacher might apply to St. John Bosco and a teacher might apply to Fitzroy. Now, that's a really good example, no different than, say, if you're a banker applying to ANZ versus ASB or TSB. Too many people just put in an application that might be banking. Now, they are very different organizations. And if you don't know that, you should know that. You need to work that out. Working at ASB is going to be different than working at TSB. And those are the little examples that you need to align your value. Now, that's not going to mean that you change your whole application, but it just means that you need to do your homework. So yeah, so what are you good at? That's your value. As I say, it doesn't have to be purely financial, but at some point you have to try and be thinking about this with employers, struggling to know what the next 6 months are going to look like. if you can try and work that out in some value and how you might increase revenue, or you are able to make a significant saving for an organization by being more efficient, then that's the sort of stuff you need to consider, because that's the sort of stuff where an employer may not advertise for a role, but if you can work that out, they might hire you. And again, what have you got to lose by asking? So yeah, that's the thing, I think, in this market, again, just reiterating that point. There's just too often that we don't really sit down and understand. Like, it's pretty clear what an organization's going to give you. That they're going to give you a job, they're going to give you money, they're going to give you ability to pay a mortgage or go on a holiday because of those things. But what are you really giving them? And of course, there's lots of things, but just don't make them guess. Tell them what they're getting with you. So soft skills and technical skills, like, it doesn't, yeah, just because you're not, say marketing's a really, really good one that I think is absolutely a really interesting topic, in that there's a lot of marketing people that have been let go during this time. And I think that's because a lot of marketing people don't necessarily work out their value. So just because you're not selling something, your soft skills and your technical skills have both got massive value, but at the end of the day, that's up for you to determine. And they might say no and not give you a job, but if you don't work that part out, I think that someone else will, and that's the person that will probably get the job. So always be talking about your unique selling points. Remember, in a job application, part of the problem that I think a lot of people have, and that is lack of confidence due to simply embarrassment. I mean, it's not a town or a country where we just stand up and say, oh, I'm so good at this. That's the reality of it. But the one thing on your side is that, this is your career you're thinking about. And if you're right and you're comfortable, then all you're trying to do is know that when you walk out of every application, every interview or things like that, that you might not be the best, but you're not going to get compared exactly with the other person. You're going to be unique. That's what you're trying to prove, is that you might not be the best, but you're not going to be the same. And that means that every single application you go through, you can still feel confident that you did the right thing. But just far too many people send off 20 applications in one day and then go and tell everyone that they went for 20 jobs and that the market's really hard. Well, look, if you're going to do that and you get a result, great, but you've learned nothing. That's just a bit of luck. So this is a process of planning and really planning and understanding that value. So that it leads to the simple process of really knowing yourself. And this is the bit where, like what I'm talking about here, it works for if you want to go and retrain, if you want to go and be self-employed, or if you want to go and just traditionally apply to open vacancies or apply to jobs that aren't advertised and approach companies direct. But it all comes down to this whole point of really knowing yourself. Like, we honestly look back on a job application and you might get to talk to people for 2 hours. They don't know you, absolutely don't know you. And you just expect and hope that they'll produce questions that will pry out who you are. So what I really recommend to everybody, even like especially graduates, but it's a bit hard when you're a graduate because you kind of aren't grown up, you don't know yourself so much. But if you're anyone outside of that with life experience or work experience, you should be able to understand, who you are and really what you're bringing. And that's about understanding, who you are with things like difficult situations, teamwork, leadership, all your typical things. Is that, and people, you can tell that people will go through and look on the internet and find out how to do this whole process, and that's great. But you really want to sort of understand those key points that relate to you, and with reasons and examples. That's the big thing for me. Examples, otherwise they're just words. I mean, the amount of times I've been through interviews and I'll hear someone say, I'm motivated. It's such a typical one, because who wouldn't want to hire someone that's motivated? And so they go, I'm motivated I'm a good team player, and I'm hardworking. I was like, well, of course, like a lot of people are going to say that, but give me a story, give me an example of that. And so that it proves the point. Don't even get asked. A lot of behavioral type interviews will say, hey, look, can you please give us examples? Like, people should be doing that anyway. And I mean, it's easy for me to say, I've been in a lot of interviews, but it's otherwise it's just a word. I mean, and I don't know you. So why would I think that you're motivated or not? Like, okay, great. They put motivated down. But like, I'm motivated because I did a paper run. I've always worked. I did a job at a cafe during university when everyone else was out, I was working. Things like that. Like, that's interesting, which is really good. People will remember you, but it also proves the point. I mean, you can make them up. I'm not suggesting that you should, but of course, we're on the other side. We don't know you, but it just proves it, and it just straight on to the next thing. So understand those things. Like, knowing yourself doesn't mean that you are going to write motivated if you're not. Like, the big thing, as I said before, each application you should be going through to make sure that at the end, you weren't necessarily, you may not be the best, but you yourself, because that's who I'm hiring. So many times people think extrovert is all that companies want. That is just couldn't be further from the truth. What ends up happening is that you might be able to put on a good show that you're an extrovert or really enthusiastic and confident, when actually you do your best work by yourself and with no one around. And so what do you know? They put you in a team of really sort of high energy, extroverted people, and you can't stand it, and you're not good. And so you've let the organization down, but most importantly, you've let yourself down because you're not happy in your environment. They've put you in a job that you said you were, and you're not. And so it might mean that you miss out on some jobs, but at least you are, when you do get hired, you're able to do really good work. And when you do really good work, you get good references, and that leads to other jobs. You can't go to another job having not done a very good effort for 18 months in a company and tell them that it was because they put you in a team of extroverts when you're really quite quiet. Like, that's just not going to fly. So you've got to own this, and you've got to then work out how that's going to benefit the company. So there's going to be some things that, like for example, I'm terrible at administration. Sian's helped me with all of this. I'm not that great at it, but I am good at other things. And so if someone put me in a heavily administration type role, I wouldn't be doing well. But it's for me to decide that. Let's just say during an application, I read the job description, and it seems to me like it's 15% administration, or 20% administration, 80% ideas. Now, every single job that we are going to go for is going to have things that we don't like. But when you come in with your eyes wide open and you've understood that, and you know your gaps, I suppose, and you touch on them, you're not going to go parade around to an employer that, hey, I'm no good at most of your job. Not at all. You want to just make sure that 80% really spins your wheels. And so that you know that when the 20% come in, there's still, the guts of the job is something you love, but you're going to have to do things that you don't like. And that's really understanding yourself, is knowing that, right? You don't want to get into a job in this market and then realize you haven't done this exercise properly, because there will be other people knocking at the door, and that presents a bit of a problem for some people, and that just can't perform. And so, yeah, it's really, really is an exercise. And as I say, knowing yourself also helps you out if you want to go and retrain. Like, the amount of times you'll get someone that thinks technology is the way forward, and so they'll go and study that and then realize that their personality just completely doesn't fit, and they get halfway through the course and they're like, it's not for me. So this is just a good life experience, life exercise. If you want to be self-employed, let's just say, you do look at that option right now, because it's very real in this province. It's a great idea. But maybe you don't do well working on your own, or you can't deal with pressure well. See, these are, when you really sit down and work this stuff out, you might say, okay, well, I better not go and do that business on my own, because these are some of the things I do know about myself. So understanding, and again, with all of these points, the pros and cons and what did you learn, it's always going back to this point of letting an employer know that you're thinking. You're always thinking. You're not just 20 applications today, 10 tomorrow. You're thinking that, okay, these are the 5 that I really want. I'm going to do a whole lot of work on that and understand it, because this is my job today. And there's going to be 5 that I don't mind so much, but I'm still going to put in a little bit more effort, and that's going to be my result. So that's the big thing about this, is really understanding who you are, because you know you better than anyone else. And that's what people are hiring, that person. The technical skills, you can practice those, but I find that in most cases, technical type questions for technical people, it comes straight to you, because you've done it or you haven't. But these soft skills and these knowing yourself, that's a little bit harder to pry out. Often you can have one of your friends go, hold on a minute, you're really good. And you're like, oh, okay, I am. So that's the experience you've got to be going through right now. So yeah, further from that is like, how do you know these things? So as I just said before, your colleagues, your friends, what do they say about you? Ask them. Like, you don't have to do this for every job, right? You just do this once, and you'll know about how to apply this to multiple roles, or to lots of things in life. But it's not saying, oh, I've got a new job, I've got to go and talk to my friends again about what I'm good at. Not at all. But yeah, again, like I said before, what are the examples that prove this? They're just words. Another really good, and I'll get to this in another slide, but it's all about stories. Like, what is your working story? Like, how did Sean end up at Venture Taranaki? I want to know. Like, that's my icebreaker at the start, often in an interview. So don't make it a speech. Make it something that you've actually thought about, but you haven't written down. And right, okay, I was expecting this question, but I want to know that story. Like, this is a guy I'm going to sit next to, and at a desk. Like, I want to get to know him. I want to know what he's about. And you know what? There's going to be 3 people, and it's going to be a tough decision. But I felt like I knew Sean, I knew Tim, I knew John, and that is what every employer wants, because every time you're doing that through an application, you're giving yourself a shot at getting called up if you missed out, because they won't go through the process again if you were that good. They'll ring up and go, oh, I really wanted Tim, but we didn't have a spot for him. And then 3 months later, his company comes up, they'll just ring you straight up. Come in for another chat. We've got a great role for you. So you're creating jobs by doing this planning and the effort you put into. You've got the ability to create your own roles. Stories are personal, and this is again the thing that you want. I can't stress enough around value and that you're unique, because whether you like it or not, you are. But what tends to happen is during job application processes that everyone actually stops being unique and they start being the same, because they are thinking, oh, this is the sort of person they'll want, and without even actually talking to anyone and saying, oh, look, I bet they want someone like this. And so everyone sort of slightly changes. And then actually, if you've done a good job of masking that, you get to references and they're like, oh, they weren't like, they're not like that at all. I haven't got experience with those sorts of things with this person. And that's where it can fall over. So, those stories are so good. Like, you got to also appreciate that, whether it's an HR team or whether it's dealing directly with an owner of a business, everyone likes, we tend to like people just by default. And so when you can give me good stories that are truthful and that are interesting, then I'm warming towards you. And that's all you can ask. And so, you don't have to have an HR team sitting there who are trying to get those things out. That's their skill. They're often very good at being able to open you up. And that's because they want to know who you are, and they're struggling, without, that effort of doing it themselves. They're struggling to find out who you are. So those stories are personal. Sean's story about moving back to Taranaki is very different than mine. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It just means that there's 2 guys that have unique stories, and they're both interesting, and people will like that. There's no right or wrong. There's no like, oh, that's a 10 out of 10 answer, Sean, because it's just his story. And so that's the main thing. And really using those examples is critical of all of this stuff. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a word. Right, so yeah, here's a whole slide for stories. It's like, honestly, it's really tough, and I know this might sound silly, and people might be upset by me saying it, but a day's interviewing of people saying the same things is horrific. Like, it's boring, because we're struggling, we're trying to make sure that people are themselves, but people are so closed off because they're used to doing a process a certain way. And they're nervous, right? A lot of people want something, and so that's really, really hard. But that story is critical. Like, I remember one of the job interviews I went for when I was a graduate way back, and I remember just using all my examples in my interview, and I kind of didn't know this was good at the time, but in hindsight, I think it would have been great. And that all my examples were of me working on oil rigs, which is what I did after university. Now, they weren't HR related, absolutely none of them. I didn't do an HR job, I was just literally a labourer. But I don't think that many people would have sat in an interview and heard a HR graduate talk about working on the rigs. And so there's an ability for people to remember me. I might not have been the best, but they would have remembered that interview. And when you're not purely basing on number of years experience, which I hope no employers are these days, or degrees even, you're basing it on the person and what they can do for you, then those are little snippets that are brilliant. But, too many people won't talk about an example of working at I don't know, KFC when they were at university, because they think, oh, there's no way I'm going for a process engineering job, or I'm going for a marketing, job. They won't want. I do want to know that. I want to know that. I want to know that you did those things, because it instantly tells me a little bit about you, because lots of people wouldn't even apply to that. And everyone's got a story like that, right? Everyone's got a story about how they sacrificed a little bit, or they did things that are a little bit left field, to help people out or to help themselves out. And that's what we want to know about people. You want to make this process really tricky for whoever's hiring, but it's not. Normally there's one, maybe two people, and the other four that might have got interviewed are not even close. So that's what you want to do. You really, really important opportunity with stories and being unique is how you differentiate yourself from others. It's the classic example of when a fifth person who is interesting and has put in the planning and the effort and the time into the application beats the number one, because the number one person at the start, based on experience, is kind of a little bit comfortable thinking, I've got this. I've got all the things they want. Now, hooks being smart, this is the sort of thing I love. This is really, like, this is good questions. This is engaging. Now, this isn't at an interview stage even, but too often you'll get someone who's just looked at the website, seen a few things, writes that in their cover letter, and away they go. That's not going to work, because everyone can do that. So again, you're not making yourself unique. So hooks are really key. And like that oil rig example is kind of a bit of a hook. But good questions are a significant hook. But don't ask a question unless you want to know the answer. So many times this happens where people have been told good questions are really important. And so you'll get to an application, or you'll ring someone up, to ask about a job, and you are absolutely just ticking questions off. Not even hearing the answer, just say, oh, I was told I better ask questions, so I ask questions, and the person can tell that you're just going through the motions, and that's no good. Remember, you want to be able to give yourself the right information that you want to say yes. The more due diligence you're doing on a company or a role, the more they want you. But too often you're getting in a situation, and look, I appreciate that it's hard for people at the moment, because they don't have a job for a lot of people, and they just want something, and I get that. but you've still got to be thought out. You still got to come to work every day and be good at your job. Even if it's not a job you don't want, you can't lead on that you're just doing that job for the sake of now. Like in another world, I do run a cleaning business because of my recruitment skills. And I don't tend to hire cleaners. I hire people that have the right attitude and want to have a job, often for part-time hours, for a reason. Now, the amount of times a cleaner would come and just say, oh, I'll get that job because I've been cleaning for years. That's just not what I want. So, you've got to try and engage those sorts of things with good questions and, I suppose just knowing more than it's expected of you. And that's the sort of thing that, like if you go and approach a company that's not advertising for a role, then how are you going to approach them straight up? Like you want to talk to them about what it's like to work at that business, not have you got a job today? Because that's a yes or no. But if you go and approach someone and say, hey, look, Sean, I've seen you've just joined the Venture Taranaki team, and I've got these skills. I'd really like to understand how your role's been. Could I take you out for a coffee? Well, you've got to have good questions to talk to Sean because he doesn't know you before that. And the more you can ask him questions, the more he's engaging in you. And ultimately, indirectly, that will be an interview, because he'll feel like you get someone talking more than you're talking, and they're naturally warming towards you. That's statistically true. So if you can keep them talking, they will come back to the office and potentially, have good things to say about you. But if you're just asking or rattling off a whole bunch of questions, or you've got some comments there that you've just got, I'm just going to drop this in there. Like I could do that because I've been doing this for years. But if you think you can just go and drop a little thing in that you're doing this on purpose, maybe because I told you, just be aware that it doesn't come that easy. So when you ask something or you tell something, mean it and want to know the answer. So those sorts of things are really important. Like at the end of the day, like no company is off limits to any single person for a job ever. But if you're going to go about this process and just say, oh, I'm just going to approach everyone, and then 10 other people do before you, there'll be a point where a company says, look, we can't allow that. So, it might be the people before you that have shut that avenue. But at the end of the day, if you do it, think it out and you do it properly, people are always interested to know, just as long as you're not coming across like, I just want something from you, and that's a job. So hooks are really, really key, and that comes with a bit of skill. It certainly doesn't come by sending 20 applications in a day, never. So some things you really must know, and I know I don't even know why I should put this in, but it seems to me that a lot of people don't understand this, is that like working for, let's say you're an accountant by trade and you enjoy running. So working for Nike as an in-house accountant would be very different than working for an in-house accountant for Mitre 10. And so you've got to tell an employer why you like that industry, because it's still the same job, but the people that really love their job are doing work within an industry that they enjoy. But in this environment, you don't have to hit all of those love categories. You just need to know it. Like you need to be able to understand that this is what you're doing, and these are the spin-offs that you're going to have from working in this industry, rather than the manager expecting to tell you, oh, Tim, I'm sure you don't really like working for Mitre 10, but I've given you a list of things here that I think would be great for you to take away from this industry. Know them yourself, like work it out. But just trying to understand that value of what you think you would be able. Remember, there's no wrong answer. So there's no way that someone will go, oh, that's not right, because nobody's asked you to present your value in week 1 or month 1 or long term. You've just done that yourself. Now they might think, oh, I don't, but it shows, it gives me a little insight that I might, if I want to hire someone that I didn't think I was going to hire 5 minutes ago, then I want to be able to think that I can leave you to it. Because one of the reasons why an organization doesn't want to take on an extra person is because they have to spoon feed everything to you. And so sure, you might eventually be quite good, but in the meantime, you know, Sean's gone and spent 3 months trying to get you up to speed. I want to know that you'll do that yourself, or at least give it a good go and ask Sean when you need help. So that's a really important thing. And then, you know, just a question that is left out is like, just tell me why you want to work for my company, not why you're an accountant. Like, why you want to work for an accountant for my business. And that is something that you must be able to articulate. Not a speech again. It would be slightly different for every company, right? But I want to know why you want to work for this business. Right, some don'ts. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I'm talking about things here that are pretty much your traditional see a job on Seek, but it does work once you do this exercise, or you really sit down. It might take a couple of days, it might take a week to really work it out about what you're offering, that value proposition. Then, you know, you are in a position where you could find a job having a coffee or having a beer with someone, because you're instantly able to talk about it. And I'll get to that in a little. One thing, just in case I forget, it's all very well to write this stuff down. You have to say it out loud. You have to practice this by saying it out loud, because how many times have we all written, you know, pages and pages of notes, and then someone asks you while they're sitting right in front of you that you've often never seen before, and you just don't say what you think, and then you leave the room and you're like, covered all. So do it a few times. You know, get someone to hear you out. And I know that might be embarrassing, but at the end of the day, look, if you don't have a job at the moment, these are the things you're just going to have to do. Even if you've got a job and you want it, and there's that dream job that you've applied for, this is an exercise that you probably haven't done, and you should. So, you know, it's not easy, but it does apply to everything that we're all involved in. Is being self-aware, is just really being self-aware. One other thing is applying without planning, the 2-minute rule. So when I was working at a few companies in-house recruitment, it was a real competitive market in engineering a lot of the time. And so I would ring up people instantly, 5 minutes after they've applied, and they wouldn't kind of know who I was or what company I worked for or anything about that company. If you press send on an application, expect a call back right away. And if you're not ready, don't press send. Because when you are ready, you're ready right all the way through to the end of the interview. You don't have to pre-do this again. Like, if you're ready from that send and you do this exercise for all of these jobs that you might go for, you know, when you press send, expect the call. And that goes back to, you know, what your value is, what you know about that industry, and why you want to work for that specific company. Assume answers. You know, like I've touched on this right throughout, but there's no perfect answer. There is no perfect answer other than the ones that are unique to you. Like, honestly, you've got to walk out of an interview going, that's who I am. That is Tim Carrington in that room. And that's all you can expect of yourself. And then there won't be so many highs and lows and lack of confidence and overconfidence with roles, because people are like, I smashed that interview, or I did really well in that application. And then they don't do well in others. It's because they didn't do anything different. And maybe an HR team or a manager is really good at this stuff and absolutely took them apart. Well, it shouldn't necessarily be that. You know, I don't believe in organizations making it really tough for people. But at the end of the day, that's their call. They're allowed to do that. They want to be able to make sure that they've got the person they think they have, and they'll do what they need to do to be able to find that out. So yeah, just another thing is that you can get into the habit of creating a speech. Like, I've been in a couple of interviews where it was pretty obvious somehow someone's got the interview questions, and it's terrible. It's so obvious. Like, it just, if you think that people don't know that, they do. And so you don't want to go, okay, the first question will be, or they're going to ask me, you know, about this, and so and spend a week rehearsing all of these answers that are you know, bang on, when they're not. You know, just bullet point everything, understand who you are, and really just relax and just pause and go, hold on a minute, They're just asking me about who I am. That's really all it is. Not who I'm trying to fabricate, actually who I am. And so don't create that speech. Don't go like, and often when people have heard a question that they've written it out, they'll start before I've even finished. And so you've got to take your time and just understand that you did your homework before you applied. And so this stuff will be able to be recalled easily. So yeah, test yourself. Your planning's all been done, and talk to people. Try and articulate to someone that's maybe a friend's friend, or just your parents or your friends. But they're not interrupting you. You're hearing that you're presenting your value proposition to them, and giving them a little bit of a story about your career so far. Just do that a couple of times. You've got nothing to lose, and it will help in a big way. Yeah, and as I say it out loud. Like I was reading some stats the other day, even about video, and that listening, hearing is by far the best form of when people internalize it. So, you can watch videos, but actually when people are just hearing you on the phone or questions are asked, that's when people are really engaging. So saying it out loud to yourself just means that you're internalizing better, and you've done it before, right? You've said these things out loud. And when you walk into a room, you don't have to be so scared, because they're only going to ask things that are a little spin-off of everything that you know. So yeah, I've already talked about this. Just lastly, everybody needs to know this about you if you're unemployed right now and you're looking for a job, not just you. Now apply, and typical advertised jobs, and also companies that you think you actually might match up with. Don't be afraid to go and see them. I think that's it.
Great. Thanks for that, Tim. We've had a bunch of questions come through. We've got about 4 minutes, so we'll crack into them. Okay, first one. There's a list of companies, this is just to your point now. There's a list of companies I'd like to work for, but unsure on best way to approach. What do you suggest for the best way for this cold call?
Just knowing that value of what one of those companies are, like trying to work out what their value is in the market and how you match that up. Again, you've got nothing to lose. They don't have an advertised job, so just don't make it about make me feel like you're only ringing me up so that you get something out of it.
Cool. Is it a good idea to ask for feedback if you don't get a role? And then what should I do with that feedback?
Yep, of course it is. You don't always get good feedback because people are busy, and look, that's something that everyone should improve on, but it's hard. You get 150 applications. What do you do? And everyone, the fact of the matter is that not every single application is always looked at by every company. So feedbacks, again, I'd still be pushing this whole getting to know yourself, and then you kind of would work your own feedback out. If you nail that, you'd work your own feedback out, because you're only getting asked this stuff or technical things. And so if you haven't nailed your technical questions, well, that's something that you'll get through more experience, or you need to go and work on. But your soft skills, if you really do this exercise well, you would be able to, the only feedback you should get was, hey, look, Tim, you were great, but a person's a better fit. That's fine. Can't do anything more than that.
Cool. With the impact of COVID-19, are employers looking for anything different in particular?
Look, I can't speak for other organisations, but I would just say that this is a real opportunity for, again, value. That's what people are about. I mean, it's just making sure that everybody sitting out there that is doing a role is doing it to the best of their ability. And unfortunately, right now, if there were, certain companies that don't feel that, then it's not an excuse, because it is very real with what's happening with COVID. But that's the time where these people might say, right, we need to do a bit of a restructure. So if that happens, that's some people are brilliant that's happened to, but it's just making sure when you leave, you do understand that value that you have, and go and see them if you're not sure, and get that feedback before you move on. But I don't think they're looking for anything different in particular, but if you can tell me about how you can add value to an organization, and I think that you don't need to be managed the whole time, you'll be self-managed, I might open up a job for you.
You spoke about questions, some of the do's and don'ts. There's one that came through here. Can you recommend some good questions for the applicant to ask the interviewers?
I do, but I wouldn't want to give people them because otherwise then people just use those. So it's got to fit with you. But genuinely, like, you got to understand that the whole time you're trying to do due diligence on the company, not just, please, can I get an interview? And then I get an interview, the interview goes well, and then I hope that you're going to pay me the right money. And then, so like, make sure that you're making sure that you're the right fit. And again, working out that percentage in your own mind, like, okay, this is 60% really good for me, 40% I'm not going to be so good, but I'm still going to take the job and I'll know that. And then when you get there on the first day, it ends up being only 15% that negative, you're winning. And when it's 40, you're expected it. So, you know, it's doing that part. And I think they're not expecting anything else other than for you to make sure that you are who they're hiring.
Okay. And one last question here. What's the best hook that you've seen in an interview panel?
It really is just that interesting. Really, it is. Like, and you know, some people have climbed mountains, or other people have surfed around the world, and there'll be a few people on the panel that'll sit really well with, and others not. But you know, for me and my hook sitting there, if someone had told me an amazing story about maybe that they helped out, you know, a family member who went through some difficult times, that sits really nicely with me. It might not sit. So a hook's unique to an individual, but it's those unique stories, and sometimes it's funny. Like I remember one with Fonterra where one of the candidates said that, you know, when they were going for a grad role, that they remember, you know, when they used to pull down to the tankers when they used to go past their place and the tanker would beep. That would have a group laughing. Whereas you could have someone who's just going for a Fonterra job that gets all technical about why they want to work for Fonterra. So, you know, that sort of thing could be a brilliant hook when the other person have all got the same answers about how Fonterra is a big global company and, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just boring.
Nice. So it's a nice way to end on that one, I think. So thank you, everyone.
Just if anyone, I do have a bit of a sheet that people can ask for if they, you know, to help pry some of the stuff out. If they want to email me at jobs@carringtonrecruitment.com, I'm more than happy to help. If anyone's got any questions they want to ask from this, then feel free to give me a ring as well.
Tim, in the chat box, can you just write your email address?
Sure.
And I'll also send out Tim's contact details on a follow-up email alongside the recording. And I'll also send out the invitation to 2 webinars that we're doing in partnership with Tech Week next week. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. Thanks again, Tim, and have a nice week.
No worries. Thank you.
Cheers.